Hi. One of my subscribers, Peter, noticed that I could have set an option that would have made the demonstrations a little bit better. And it happens to be an option that I normally set when I install Lazarus. But when I installed Lazarus for these demonstrations, it cleared that option, and so it wasn't working the way I normally have it work. Anyway, without further ado, let's bring up Lazarus. And when we start Lazarus, it brings up the last application that you're working on. And let's run. Normally you hit F9 to do a fast compile and then actually run the app. So I'll press F9 right now. And this is what we were normally getting. The logon window would appear, and it's appearing on top of all the clutter of the integrated development environment. So it would be better to have it run just on the desktop as it would normally run without the IDE in the background, cluttering things up. So I'll close the window. And now we will go to Tools, Options, and then in the environment list, we go to Window, and we come over to Hide IDE Windows on Run, and you select that. And then you apply it, click OK. Now we'll press F9 and see what happens. The IDE gets hidden. There's no clutter around our window, and here's our application running. So that's the way I prefer to run Lazarus when I'm developing, and that's the way I'll keep it now. Thanks, Peter, for bringing that to my attention. Now, when you close the app, this only happens on Linux. At least that's my experience. On Linux, the toolbar doesn't get redisplayed. Now, there's two ways of bringing it back that I'm aware of. One, I'm using Pop! OS, and you click on the date and time up here, and that brings up this window. And you'll see it has my application, Lazarus, my application. If you click on this, it will restore that title bar. The other way of doing it, which will probably work on all versions of Linux, is just to come down here to Lazarus and click it. And the title bar, the toolbar comes back. So that's one little tip that I'll offer, and now we will proceed on to enhancing our application. Welcome back. This is going to be part 2.5. We're going to make some corrections to what I did in part 2. Now, what I did in part 2 did work. But after I published that video, I went back and looked at the things I struggled through and the way I went about displaying the main menu window, and I realized I was coding against the principles of Lazarus and the way they create and show forms. And so I actually made it more complex than it needed to be. And so in this video, I plan on showing how to correct it and make it work the way Lazarus intends it to work. Okay? That's what we're going to do. So let's look at the main program code. So I will hit F12 to close that my logon form. And now we're looking at the source code editor. And this tab here is the main program source code. And as we saw in a previous video, if you want to see the project source code, because that tab doesn't normally appear unless you want it to appear, you have to go to Project, like I just did, and you have to go all the way to the bottom where it says View Project Source. And when you click that, then this tab will appear here. And this is the actual main code for the project. Now, what I had done was when I created, okay, so we created this form first. So that became our main form, right? Our main form, which if you look here, it did. It created, it called this procedure application create form, and then it gives it the class for the form and the variable that it will then create. Okay, and then when we created unit my application, oh, by the way, it references the actual unit here in the uses clause. Uses clause, it references everything it needs. Unit logon is one of them. Unit logon actually defines the form, okay? So that's why it has to include it here. And then when we created the menu window, which we called unit my application, right? What Lazarus did was it created in the main project again, and I've commented it out, but this is what it created. It created application create form my application, okay? And it added this reference, which I've commented out here, and we're going to fix all this. It created this entry in the uses clause, okay? And then what did I do? In unit logon, in order to make the form appear for the main menu, okay, so the logic was if we have a good user ID and password, then we do all this stuff, which includes making the logon window invisible by setting visible to false. And then we actually create the instance of the form for the main menu, my application, in here. And so I had to add a variable up here of type form my application. And then down here I had to actually do a create and then a show modal, right? Well, that kind of overcomplicates the way this needs to work. So what I did was, what I should have done was allow Lazarus to do what it wanted to do. So here we are, we're back at the main program. And this is the way it would have been if I hadn't played around with it the way I did, okay? In the uses clause, you would have unit my application. And down here, after the creation of the main logon window, it would then create the main menu window. Now, when it creates a form that's not the main form, the main window, it sets its visibility to false. In other words, it doesn't show. And so we will save those changes I've just made. That's a Control S. All right. Now we need to go to the logon source code. And that's for this window here, right? So what I had done was I had created the variable, which will be the form, and then I did the actual creation event here, and then I did a show modal. So what I don't need to do is I don't need that variable anymore, so we'll get rid of that. And then we don't need to create the application because it was created by the main program. So we can get rid of this. Excuse me. All right, pull that up. Okay, so now I think this is going to work the way Lazarus intends it to work. It's still going to make the, when we get a good password, user ID and password, it's going to make the logon window go invisible by setting visible to false. Excuse me. Then it's going to show the form that was already created in the main program. And then when that's done, when you exit the main menu, it will, show modal will automatically set the form to visibility to false, and then it will return, and then the visibility for the logon window will be set to true, and it will display. Okay, so hit Control S to save these changes, and I think we're back to where it should have been. Okay, and we don't need to make any changes to the main menu. It's fine. All right. So let's try running this by pressing F9 and see if we're okay. All right. So now we've got our logon window, right? And if I put in John Smith, and I tab to the next window, and I put in password, and I hit tab, there's my application window, and there's no logon window behind it. So I can exit by clicking on Files and Exit, and now our logon window appears and the main menu disappears. And that's the way we intended it. And this is just a little bit simpler, okay? So continuing on, I got to bring up my main toolbar here. Okay, that won't happen under Windows. All right. Now you notice that when my logon is displayed, it's displayed right where we design it. It's displayed right here on the screen. So how can we make it so that that window will appear dead center in your workspace, in your screen? Okay. So we've clicked on this. We have this as our object that we're currently looking at. As you can see up here in the object inspector, it's the main form. And now, put my cheaters on. We look down in this list of properties, and we're looking for position. This is position right here, right? So this is currently set to default, and we want to have it. We want it to put it in the screen center. All right. I think desktop center would work, but let's use screen center just for grins. Okay, we've changed it. Hit Control S to save it. And now let's rerun this and see what happens. F9. Okay. Now our window appears centered in our screen. And I think that's what you want. Well, if we did it for this one, We should probably also do it for the main menu, right? So let's see here. Let's let me see, F12. Okay. So we highlight this window, make sure we're looking at that window. We are. If you look at the object inspector, and it's still highlighting position, and we want to change that to screen center. Okay. All right, and we hit Control S to save that. And now let's run it by pressing F9. And here's our main window, our first window. And we want to put in John Smith. And then we want to put in password. Enter. Oh, tab. And there's our main menu now. It's centered too. Okay? All right. I think if I click this, it'll bring it back too. Yeah. So, that's a few details that needed to be made, some changes that need to be made to get us back on course with the way Lazarus generates the code and the way we should then show the windows. Let's just take a quick look before we leave this session. If I go back to, this is the My Unit, this is the main menu. No, it's the menu window, not main menu. This, and if we look at the visibility, visible, you'll see it's false. It's currently set to false, and that's the way it gets designed. And then if we go back to looking at the first window that appears, the logon window, right? And focus on that. And then we go to look at the visibility. It's true, right? And that's the way Lazarus generated it. It sets that first unit form that you create. It sets the visible property to true, okay? And that's why it's the first one that appears. So I think that thoroughly explains and corrects the issue. And now we can move on to part 3, which will be coming up in probably a few days. So thank you for watching. If you like the content that I'm producing, please give me a like. And if you want to receive notifications when I issue new videos, subscribe. Thank you very much.